Now, Michael Turner, he has been a Drakeologist for more than 30 years. Draking, that's what he calls it, involves following in the footsteps of Sir Francis Drake, the first Englishman to sail around the world. Drake made forays to the West Indies, Peru and the east coast of Africa before he died on board his ship and went to a rather watery grave. Michael told Saturday Live why he was so fascinated with a man he describes as greedy, brave and extremely ruthless.
When I became a Drakeologist back in 1980 as a result of reading a few biographies, I had to see Drake's world because the story was so fascinating, and I said to myself, I shall go draking, no one's done this, I shall photograph everywhere in the world that Drake went and do something different. And 30 years later I'm carrying a massive crucifix. It's cost me scores of thousands of pounds, anguish, and there are great difficulties. Some parts of the world are just so difficult to get to. I have a Drake office. It's plastered with actual size copies of Drake's voyage maps that I've needed around the world for finding obscure places. Overall, I've been to 72 countries. A lot of my work is based upon fieldwork discoveries. For example, in Cape Verde Islands, I actually found the Hermit's House, which Drake's men noted when they were collecting water on their last stop, crossing the Atlantic towards Brazil. And it was a great thrill to find that Hermit's House complete with his altar of stones outside the door. And I've gone to some unusual places like Palau in Micronesia. And I've also been in the remotest parts of the uncharted waters of the Strait of Magellan, with a temperature of 7 degrees, being seasick in a force 9 storms. That experience for me was a cross between heaven and hell. Down in Western Sahara, 12.5 years ago I went there, and due to it being a military zone, no one would take responsibility in letting me get into a fishing boat to photograph pieces of rock, which we would call capes. I sat in a hotel for 6 days in the desert near Mauritania, waiting for people to get me authorization, but it never came. When you're a Drakeologist, some of these countries have never seen a person doing research like this on their own, and they just stop you. I had been to a country in West Africa called Guinea 2 Christmases ago. I was arrested in a village by the village elders. They handed me over to the army, and I was made to sleep in a concrete shack on a wooden platform. And I was detained for 12 hours because, unknown to me, Guinea had a coup, and they thought that I was probably another one of these famous Englishmen that had been interfering in government politics in that part of the world. Draking is this: you have to photograph every event in Drake's life. If he captured a city, you've got to photograph the route the soldiers marched in, the ships sailed in, the fortifications they would have passed, the buildings they would have occupied, ransacked, ransomed. You're photographing everything that Drake possibly would have seen or certainly was next to. These rusty ship nails were from the 1590s, and it's wonderful to know that Drake was walking around when these nails were on the ground. Sir Francis Drake the man is a very interesting question to answer. I don't follow Drake because I'm mesmerised by what a wonderful person he was. I'm really captivated by his achievements and what he did. I don't care what personality it takes to do what he did. Drake was utterly ruthless in the pursuit of glory and fame and money. I've got loads of charts up in the attic. I've got loads of press cuttings there. And there's pottery from Nombre de Dios, which was on the ground when Drake was there. Cloves that he would have brought home from Indonesia. I've got pebbles from beaches in Portugal. Minor examples of the pebbles he used to ballast his ships at Cape Sagres. The great white cliffs of California at Point Reyes. I've got a piece of rock there. And most interestingly, a fragment of salt which they lifted from the salt pans in the Cape Verde Islands. And I found some sago in the remote wilds of southeast Indonesia which Drake saw. And there's some shells from the driest Drake anchorage in the world near Antofagasta in Chile. And there's some volcanic pieces of rock here from Fogo in the Cape Verde Islands. And there's some pretty rock here which came out of the mines in Bolivia, where the silver came from that Drake captured when he was on the coast of Bolivia and Chile. Down here we've got 3 framed pictures of Drake's will, and my joke is if he knew what I'd be doing 400 years later, he would have mentioned me. I'd certainly like to be crawling across the cliff on Horn Island overlooking Cape Horn, which Drake did, and that's going to be expensive to get there. There is the search for his coffin of lead, which is probably hermetically sealed 3 miles off Portobello. There's treasure to look for in Nombre de Dios, which he buried from his robbery in the jungle. There are anchors to look for in Tierra del Fuego. Draking's like peeling an onion. Once you think you've got one layer completely finished, there's another underneath. It's a labour of love, but it's become a burden because I'm really trapped within it now. I cannot get out till I finish it. My dad once said to me when he was alive, "Well, you've done enough now, why don't you stop?" But if you're going to make a chain from one distance to a destination, you have to have every link in the chain in place, otherwise the project's incomplete. It's like the anchor chain. I'm anchored to the project. All I can see is it might be winding down, but I'll never finish it.
Michael Turner, who incidentally is 57 today, so happy birthday, a day off from Draking maybe. If there is a theme to Saturday Live today, I think it's endeavour.